Imagine busting your ass at work, trusting your boss with your career, and sharing your deepest dreams with the woman you love, only to find out they've been working together, behind your back, to screw you over. This isn't just betrayal. This is a knife in your career, your bank account, and your effing heart. When you look back, the red flags are always there. You just don't see them until it's too late. At the time, they look like normal life small coincidences, harmless gestures, stupid little things you brush off. That was me a few months ago. I thought my life was not perfect, but stable. A steady job, a boss I actually respected, and a girlfriend I was convinced was the one. If you had told me back then that both of them, my girlfriend and my boss, would end up working together to screw me over, I would have laughed in your face. But that's exactly what happened. I was working at this mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago. Not glamorous, but not a dead end either. My boss, Richard, was one of those old school guys who liked to play mentor. Early 40s, slick suit, the type of man who always had a story about how he closed the deal or saved the client. To be fair, he was good at his job. Clients trusted him, and I, like an idiot, trusted him too. Then there was Melissa, my girlfriend of almost 3 years. She worked in retail, nothing fancy, but she was smart, quick, funny, the kind of woman who knew how to charm everyone in the room. My friends used to joke that she was out of my league, but I thought that was just luck, like maybe, for once, I'd actually won in life. The three of us even crossed paths a few times. Melissa would come to office events, and Richard, being the charismatic boss, would talk to her, crack jokes, compliment her. I didn't think much of it. That's just Richard, I told myself. He could charm a brick wall. But then little things started happening. Like one night, I was talking to Melissa about this new client Richard wanted me to pitch. Just casual stuff, how stressed I was, how I wasn't sure if I was ready to handle such a big account. The next day, Richard brought up the exact same insecurities in our one-on-one meeting, word for word. I laughed it off at first. Wow, small world, I thought. Maybe Melissa had just guessed, but deep down, something felt off. Another time, Melissa asked me weirdly specific questions about my job. Not just the "how was your day" kind of stuff, but details about contracts, deadlines, budgets. When I asked why she cared, she shrugged. I just want to understand your world better, and like a fool, I believed her. Here's the thing, trust blinds you. When you trust someone, you explain away the cracks. You convince yourself you're imagining things. I kept doing that, until one night, at an office happy hour, I caught something I couldn't explain away. We were at this bar downtown, just the usual after-work drinks. Melissa came along because she knew a few people in the office. At one point, I went to grab us a couple of beers. When I came back, I saw her and Richard standing a little too close. Not touching, not flirting in an obvious way, but the way they leaned in, the way they smiled, it wasn't normal. When they noticed me, Melissa laughed loudly, like she'd been caught. Richard just clapped me on the back and said, "You're a lucky man, Harper." That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the image. My gut twisted, but my brain kept saying, "Stop being paranoid." Looking back now, I realized that was the beginning, the moment the game started, and I was the last one to know the rules. Within weeks, Richard gave me the opportunity of a lifetime, and Melissa suddenly became way too interested in how much money was on the line. Now imagine what happens next. But before that, smash that like button and hit subscribe, cause the craziest part is just getting started. A few weeks after that office happy hour, Richard called me into his glass-walled office. He always sat like a king behind his desk, cufflinks gleaming, leather chair tilted back just enough to say, "I run this place." "Evan," he said, folding his hands, "I've got something big for you." Those words hit like a shot of adrenaline. I was 28, hungry, trying to climb the damn ladder. Richard knew it, and every time he dangled opportunity in front of me, I felt like a kid staring at candy through the glass. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were notes about a massive new client, a logistics company worth millions. If we landed them, it would be the firm's biggest contract of the year. "I want you to take point," Richard said. "Lead the pitch, manage the project, show me you can handle the big leagues." My first thought, finally, after years of grinding, staying late, eating dinner at my desk, here it was my chance to prove myself. I walked out of that office buzzing, folder in hand, like it was the damn holy grail. That night, I couldn't shut up about it at home. Melissa sat on the couch scrolling her phone while I paced back and forth. "Babe, this is it. If I pull this off, It's not just a raise, it could change everything. She smiled, but there was something calculated in her eyes. How much money are we talking about? I blinked. What do you mean? You said it's a huge client. What's the budget? Like, millions. I shrugged. I don't know exact numbers yet, but yeah, it's big. She set her phone down, leaned forward. And if you land it, you'd get a bonus, right? Or a promotion. Her tone was sharp, almost businesslike. It didn't sound like curiosity. It sounded like strategy. I laughed it off. Maybe. Honestly, I'm just focused on not screwing it up. But her question stuck in my head. Melissa had never cared about my work beyond the usual "how was your day?" Suddenly she wanted figures, percentages, projections. Over the next week, it got stranger. She'd ask things like, "So, who makes the final call on contracts? Do you or your boss? Or, if something went wrong, could the client back out?" When I asked why she was so interested, she gave me that same line again. "I just want to understand your world better." But deep down, my gut was whispering, she doesn't want to understand. She wants to calculate. Meanwhile, Richard was piling on the pressure. Late-night emails, sudden urgent meetings, endless revisions to the pitch deck. At first I thought he was just being demanding, but the more I looked at it, the more it felt like he was testing me, or maybe setting me up. One night, I came home exhausted, laptop still in my bag, and Melissa had dinner waiting. Candles, wine, pasta, the whole 9 yards. "Wow," I said, dropping into a chair. "What's the occasion?" She poured me a glass of wine, her smile sweet but her eyes sharp. "Just proud of you, babe. You're doing big things. We should celebrate before the money starts rolling in." Something in my chest tightened. She said it casually, but the words echoed, "before the money starts rolling in." I forced a laugh, clinked my glass with hers, and told myself I was being paranoid again. But paranoia or not, the feeling wouldn't leave. Especially because the next day, Richard gave me a new instruction. From now on, all documents, drafts, and updates go through me first. Don't share them directly with the client. It sounded reasonable on the surface. Chain of command, quality control, blah blah blah. But something in his tone made me uneasy. As I left his office, I noticed Melissa's name pop up on my phone screen. A text, "How's the project going? Can you show me the numbers yet?" I swear my blood ran cold. The project was about to launch, and I was working day and night to make it perfect. But somehow, Melissa had access to documents I never gave her. The first time it happened, I brushed it off. Melissa casually mentioned a detail about the client, the kind of detail I'd only just read in the confidential file the night before. "Wait," I said, staring at her across the kitchen. "How do you know that?" She froze for a fraction of a second, then smiled. "Oh, you must have told me. I just remember things better than you." I wanted to believe her. Really, I did. But my memory isn't that bad. I hadn't told her a damn thing. A few days later, Richard asked me in a meeting, "So, Evan, did you share the updated cost projections with anyone outside the team?" The way he asked, slow, deliberate, eyes drilling into me, made my palms sweat. "No, of course not." He tapped his pen, silent for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Just making sure." But there was something in his tone. Suspicious. Like he already thought I was leaking information. That night, I checked Melissa's phone while she showered. I'd never done it before. I hated myself for even thinking about it, but the paranoia was eating me alive. There were no texts with Richard, no emails, nothing obvious. But in her gallery, I found a photo she'd snapped of one of my pitch drafts. Just sitting there, clear as day. My heart dropped. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. "I was just curious," she said, hands up like she'd been caught stealing candy. "I wanted to understand what you're working on. Why are you making it such a big deal?" "A big deal? Melissa, this is confidential. I could lose my job." She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. It's just business. And besides, if this deal is so huge, don't you think we should both know what's at stake?" "We," she said, "we," like she had a seat at the table. After that, I couldn't shake the thought, is she working with Richard? It sounded insane. She'd never even met him outside of that office happy hour. But the timing, the questions, the photos, it was all too much. The pressure kept building. Richard was on my back constantly, nitpicking every slide, every sentence, as if waiting for me to trip. Melissa kept pressing for just a peek at the financials, the projections, the contracts. And then came the email. Late one night, I was finishing a revision when I noticed something strange. The client had responded to an email I hadn't sent yet. The subject line matched my draft word for word. The attachment was the exact version sitting in my outbox. But I hadn't hit send, someone else had. My stomach turned to ice. The only two people with access to my laptop were me and Melissa. I stayed up till a.m., scrolling through my sent folder, my draft folder, my backups. There it was, the hidden forwarding rule. Every time I saved a draft, it silently copied to Richard's private email. My chest pounded. Richard had set me up. He was collecting every move I made, and Melissa, she was feeding him the rest. The next morning, Melissa acted normal, like nothing was wrong. She kissed me goodbye, told me she loved me, and went off like it was any other day. Meanwhile, I sat in my car outside the office, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, thinking, I'm about to get screwed out of everything I built. And the worst part, I didn't know who to confront first. Richard, or the woman I thought I was going to marry? The client meeting was days away. I had proof something shady was happening, but if I moved too soon, I'd blow my only chance to stop them. The days leading up to the client meeting felt like walking a tightrope. Every move I made was under Richard's microscope, and Melissa's sudden interest in my work grew more invasive by the hour. I knew I couldn't just storm into Richard's office and accuse him. Without proof, I'd look paranoid, maybe even unhinged, and if Melissa was really part of it, confronting her without a plan would only tip her off. So I decided if they were playing dirty, I'd play dirtier. The first step was simple. I bought a cheap burner laptop. Nothing fancy, just enough to run PowerPoint and send emails. I worked late at the office on the official files, the ones Richard expected me to prepare, but at home, on the burner, I created a different version of the pitch. Same template, same branding, but with subtle differences. Fake numbers, a deal structure that would collapse under the smallest bit of scrutiny. It was bait. I left the draft sitting in my email drafts folder. Just like always, if the forwarding rule was still active, Richard would get it. And if Melissa was snooping, she'd snap her usual photo. Now, it was a waiting game. That night, Melissa leaned over my shoulder while I typed. Is this the final version? She asked casually, eyes flicking to the screen. Not yet, I said, minimizing the window. Still working on it. She bit her lip like she wanted to push further but didn't. Instead, she kissed my cheek and said, "Don't stay up till late." My gut twisted. She never used to care about my files. Now it was all she cared about. 2 days later, Richard called an emergency prep session. He looked smug, pacing at the head of the table with that little half smile of his. "Evan," he said, "I took the liberty of reviewing some of your projections. Frankly, I'm concerned." My heart thudded. "Here it comes. What's wrong with them?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He tapped a slide on the screen. "These numbers don't add up. If you think the client will swallow this," I cut him off. "That's strange, because that's not the version I finalized." The room went quiet. He blinked. "Excuse me?" I pulled out my flash drive, slid it across the table. "Here's the actual deck. Go ahead, compare, line by line." Richard's smile faltered for the first time. His eyes darted between me, the flash drive, and the fake slide on the projector. He knew. I knew. The others in the room looked confused, whispering. Richard cleared his throat, tried to recover. "Maybe I got an earlier draft. No big deal," but the seed was planted. The team saw it. The doubt. That night, Melissa was icy, barely spoke. She didn't even look at me during dinner. Finally, I asked, "Something wrong?" She shrugged. "Just tired." But I saw it. That flash of panic in her eyes. Like she knew the walls were closing in. The day before the client meeting, I set the final piece of my trap. I created one more draft, this time with a completely fabricated client demand, something outrageous, impossible. I saved it, closed my laptop, and waited. At p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from the client's assistant. "Just wanted to confirm we're not seriously considering the additional 15% equity concession." My chest tightened. They'd taken the bait. Richard had forwarded the fake demand to the client, trying to undercut me before the meeting. And now, I had undeniable proof. The next morning, I printed everything, the fake drafts, the email logs, the timestamp photos from Melissa's phone. I'd quietly copied them to my drive weeks ago. All the pieces lined up. Walking into the client meeting, I felt calm for the first time in weeks. I had my deck. I had my proof. And if Richard thought he was about to humiliate me in front of everyone, well, he was in for a surprise. When the client meeting started, Richard tried to take control. But I had a card up my sleeve that would flip the entire room against him, and maybe expose Melissa too. The morning of the client meeting, my nerves buzzed like live wires. I'd rehearsed my pitch a dozen times, checked and double-checked my flash drive, and tucked the folder of printed evidence under my arm. Today wasn't just about securing a deal. Today was about survival and revenge. The conference room was already buzzing when I walked in. Richard stood at the head of the long mahogany table, flanked by two junior associates. He looked sharp, confident, already warming up the room with his fake charm. Melissa sat near the back, eyes darting to me, then away quickly. The client's team entered for people in tailored suits, serious faces. The air was thick with tension. Richard clapped his hands together. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we're thrilled to present this opportunity. My colleague Evan here has been leading the project, and we're ready to show you something truly groundbreaking. My project, my idea," and he said it like he owned it. I let him talk. I let him flash his fake confidence, flipping through slides that looked eerily familiar until he landed on the equity concession slide, the one I had fabricated as bait. He paused dramatically. "Of course, we've considered your request for an additional 15% equity concession." The client's lead negotiator raised a hand, frowning. "I'm sorry. Our request? We never made such a demand. Where did this come from?" The room went silent. My moment had arrived. I leaned forward. "Actually, I can explain that." Richard froze, his smile slipping. "Evan, no. Richard, you've had your turn." I plugged in my flash drive, pulling up the real deck on the projector, line by line. I showed the accurate projections, the realistic terms, the structure that made sense. I spoke with calm authority, every word precise. The client nodded, leaning in, visibly relieved to see numbers that actually added up. Then I slid the printed folder across the table. "And here," I continued, "is the trail of drafts that were tampered with. Emails forwarded without my consent, fake numbers inserted, even fabricated client demands." I tapped the page with the timestamp. "This one was sent from Richard's account at 11:03 p.m. last night." Gasps rippled through the room. Richard's face drained of color. "That's ridiculous," he snapped. "You're trying to frame me." The client team gathered their things. "We'll need to reconsider whether this partnership is worth pursuing at all," their lead said flatly. Richard tried to recover, but it was over. He looked small, pathetic, like a kid caught cheating on an exam. When the clients left, the room was chaos. My colleagues whispered furiously. The partners exchanged grim looks. Finally, one of them turned to me. "Evan, we'll need to discuss this privately." I nodded. Of course. As Richard was led away, Melissa trailed behind him, pale and broken. Neither dared meet my eyes. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the city lights. My career wasn't saved yet, but the power dynamic had shifted. The truth was out, and for the first time, I realized I had played their game and won. But winning that battle didn't mean I'd won the war. What Richard and Melissa did left scars deeper than I expected, and the company wasn't about to let the scandal quietly disappear. The meeting room was silent. You could hear the hum of the AC, the faint clicking of the wall clock, and my own heart pounding like a drum. Richard sat stiffly in his tailored suit, his face drained of color. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, crossing and uncrossing her legs, avoiding everyone's eyes. Across the table, our biggest potential client, a sharp-eyed investor named Daniel Grant, flipped through the folder I had given him. Inside were emails, contracts, screenshots, proof, everything Richard and Melissa had tried to bury. "Interesting," Daniel finally said, placing the papers neatly back in the folder. "So let me get this straight. He pointed at me, came up with the startup idea. And you two," he shifted his gaze to Richard and Melissa, "tried to cut him out of his own company?" Silence. Richard forced a smile, that fake corporate charm he always used. "Daniel, listen, this is just a misunderstanding. Some things were taken out of context." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Out of context? Because these look like deliberate attempts to fraud a partner." He pushed the folder forward, his tone razor sharp. "And I don't invest in thieves." Melissa's face went pale. She tried to jump in. "Wait, it's not like that, I swear. Enough," Daniel snapped. That single word cut the air like a blade. Watching Richard's mask crumble was surreal. For years, I saw him as my mentor, my friend, the guy who once told me, "We'll make it together." Now, he looked like a cornered animal. "Do you realize what you've done?" He hissed at me. "You just burned every bridge you'll ever need. No one's going to trust you after this circus." I leaned back in my chair, calm in a way I hadn't been in months. "At least I'm not the one who built my empire on lies." Melissa stood up suddenly, her voice shaking. "I didn't want this." "Okay, It was Richard's idea. He said we'd just freeze you out quietly, that you'd never notice. I stared at her. This was the same woman who smiled in my face, laughed at my jokes, asked me to trust her. Now she was trying to crawl out of the mess she helped create. Richard glared at her. Shut up. But it was too late. The room was poisoned with their betrayal. Daniel closed his folder and stood. I won't be moving forward with either of you, he said firmly. Then he looked at me. But you, if you rebuild this properly, with the right team, call me. I like people who fight for what's theirs, and just like that, he walked out. The door clicked shut, leaving the three of us in suffocating silence. Richard sank into his chair, defeated. Melissa wiped at her eyes, mascara smudging. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth had already done all the talking. For a long moment, none of us moved. The silence was heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. Richard stared blankly at the polished table. His power and arrogance drained away. Melissa dabbed at her tears, but it didn't matter, her reputation was already in ruins. I stood. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound sharp in the stillness. You know, I said quietly, I used to think loyalty meant sticking with people no matter what. But loyalty without respect, without honesty, that's not loyalty, that's slavery. Neither of them looked at me. Richard just muttered, almost to himself, you'll regret this. But the words had no bite. They were empty, like the man himself. I walked out, and as the door closed behind me, the suffocation lifted. 6 months later, starting over wasn't easy. Investors weren't lining up, and building a new team meant long nights and endless risk. But every line of code, every pitch deck, every step forward felt real this time. Authentic. I learned something valuable. Success means nothing if you lose yourself to achieve it. Our startup began gaining traction, slowly but surely. We weren't making headlines yet, but we were alive. And for the first time in a long time, I was proud of the work, proud of the people beside me. Richard, word was he'd been forced out, his name stained by scandal. Melissa vanished into obscurity, her LinkedIn profile frozen in time like a relic of bad decisions. They had burned everything chasing shortcuts.